All right, let's talk about one of the biggest questions in all of history. How does a superpower just collapse? The story of Rome's fall isn't just something for the history books. It's kind of a warning, a blueprint for how even the mightiest empires can completely unravel. So let's get right into it. I mean, really think about that for a second. An empire that lasted for 1,000 years. An empire with laws and legions and aqueducts that shaped the entire known world. How does something that huge, that dominant, just vanish? It sounds impossible, right? But it happened. And how it happened is what we're going to piece together today. So, spoiler alert, there is no single smoking gun here. If you're looking for one simple reason why Rome fell, you're not going to find it. The truth is, Rome wasn't taken down by one single knockout punch. It was more like a death by 1,000 cuts, a perfect storm of problems that were rotting the empire from the inside out, long before any barbarians showed up at the gates. And these right here, these are the ingredients for that perfect storm. Think of them like a cascade of dominoes. The politics got shaky, which crashed the economy. That tore society apart, which made the military weak. And a weak military? Well, that's just an open invitation for invasion. Each problem made the next one worse. So let's start where the trouble really began. And it wasn't on some distant battlefield. No, the real problem started right at home, in the heart of the empire. The rot was internal, a nasty mix of political chaos and economic disaster. You know, funny enough, one of Rome's greatest strengths, its incredible size, eventually became its fatal weakness. The empire just got too big to manage. How do you rule that much territory with ancient technology? The result was almost a century of just pure chaos, constant civil wars, emperors getting assassinated left and right, and generals trying to grab power. Effective, stable leadership? Forget about it. And wherever you find that much instability, you're going to find corruption. We're talking about a problem that spread like a cancer through the government. Bribery was everywhere. Public money was constantly being stolen. The whole system was just paralyzed by greed. And for the average Roman citizen, you just completely lost faith that the people in charge could solve anything. And at the very same time, the economic engine of the empire was just grinding to a halt. For one thing, centuries of intensive farming had completely exhausted the land. Harvests were failing. And all that political chaos we just mentioned, it completely wrecked the trade routes that were the lifeblood of the empire's wealth. The prosperity that had built Rome was literally drying up. And then came the knockout blow for the economy. The government was broke, so what did it do? It started minting new coins with less and less silver in them. This caused runaway inflation. For the regular person, this was an absolute catastrophe. Imagine your entire life savings suddenly becoming nearly worthless. You combine that with sky-high taxes, and boom, the Roman middle class was basically wiped out. Now, all this political and economic decay wasn't just happening in the background. It started to infect the very soul of Roman society itself. It began to pull people apart and shatter the very idea of what it meant to be Roman. And this right here is so important. You had this tiny, tiny group of elites who were fabulously wealthy, while almost everyone else was suffering. This huge gap between the rich and the poor, it created massive unrest. It just destroyed any sense of shared purpose. People stopped thinking, I am a loyal citizen of Rome. It became, I need to do whatever it takes for me and my family to survive. And if that wasn't enough, a massive spiritual crisis was brewing. For centuries, being Roman was tied to worshiping the traditional Roman gods. But a new faith, Christianity, was spreading like wildfire. And this wasn't just about what God you prayed to. It was a fundamental challenge to the traditions and the authority that held the empire together. It created these incredibly deep divisions in society. The whole thing came to a head in the 4th century. First, the Emperor Constantine himself converts to Christianity, which is a huge deal. And then, just a few decades later, it becomes the official state religion of the entire empire. This was a seismic shift. It completely shattered the old religious traditions that had acted like a cultural glue for a very diverse empire for hundreds of years. Okay, so let's take stock. The empire is rotting from the inside. It's politically broken, the economy is a wreck, and society is tearing itself apart. So what's the next domino to fall? The shield. The one thing that had always protected Rome, its legendary military, starts to crack. The Roman legions, the most feared fighting force in the ancient world, they became a shadow of their former selves. And it all links back. The ruined economy meant there was no money to pay or equip the soldiers properly. The political chaos meant discipline completely fell apart. The proud professional army that conquered half the world, it was basically gone. So what's Rome's solution? A desperate one. They started hiring foreign soldiers, mercenaries, to defend their own borders. The problem? These guys fought for a paycheck, not for Rome. Their loyalty was to the highest bidder. And the biggest irony of all, many of these mercenaries were from the exact same barbarian tribes they were supposed to be protecting the empire from. You can see how this was a recipe for disaster. And all of this leads to a date that must have felt like the end of the world. 410 CE. For the first time in 800 years, the city of Rome itself, the Eternal City, was breached and sacked by an invading army, the Visigoths. This wasn't just a military loss. It was a psychological trauma that the Western Empire never, ever recovered from. And after the Visigoths, the floodgates just opened. The Vandals, the Huns, you name it, tribes started pouring across the borders, which were now barely defended. But here is the most critical takeaway from all of this. The invasions didn't cause the fall of Rome. They were the final symptom of it. These groups didn't defeat a mighty superpower. They just kicked in the door of a house that was already collapsing on the inside. So let's wrap this all up by going back to our main point. It wasn't just one thing. It was everything all happening at once. It was the perfect, deadly recipe for a total and complete collapse. Let's just trace that domino effect one last time. Political chaos leads to corruption and a broken government. The broken government ruins the economy, so there's no money. A ruined economy and huge inequality tears society apart. A divided society can't support a strong army, and a weak army leaves the borders wide open for invaders to walk right in. You see? Each disaster made the next one almost inevitable. And the consequences of this total system failure were just monumental. The end of the Western Roman Empire wasn't just the end of an empire. It was the end of an entire world order. Its collapse is what plunged Europe into the era of fragmentation we now call the Middle Ages. And that brings us back to the big question. The story of Rome is a powerful and kind of scary reminder that no civilization, no matter how powerful, is guaranteed to last forever. Its downfall started with cracks in its foundation, with internal decay that made it fragile. And the question it forces us to ask is, what can this ancient collapse teach us about the cracks forming in our own foundations today?